Hello, and welcome to Mentoring with Geraldine and the Bite Size Podcast. How are you? So I've had some questions. I run the Facebook group Strictly Education and Support, and part of joining that group is putting in questions and asking questions. And of course, I have mentees, and my graduate mastery program is right at the beginning for this semester. And so there's lots of questions from new graduates. There's lots of questions about setting up practice. And I do have someone in there who's not a new graduate at all, but she's been qualified quite some time, but also wants to now bring her practice out to the fore. She's sick of all the other jobs and she wants to really get that practice focus going. So she's joined as well. And one of the things was, I want to know how to nail it. Now, that's a pretty big one, isn't it? How do you nail something? So I really thought about this statement from my mentee. I really want to be able to nail the consult, Geraldine. Understanding it and being in control of it and not feeling like I'm just suffering under it and it's all too difficult for me. And I want to nail the consult. And I just thought, wow, this, no pressure. Just 101 things you want to learn in a bite-sized podcast. But obviously being in the program, we spend a lot of time going through, what to do, how to do it, how to spend your time, all of these things. So in any of my programs, in the academy, I go through a lot of this stuff. And with our retreat coming up at the end of the year as well, we've really got to think about, what am I going to be doing for everybody during that? But that's a long way off. Now, back to where we are now, nailing it. So my feeling is when we try to nail something is that in actual fact, we need to have systems in place. We need to have the right things to say. We need to be able to communicate from us to our client that it's the client who's doing the work. It's the client who's achieving the change. We are just a facilitator, a motivator. We're just there to help them out where we can. So when we really think about what is it to nail this consult, we need to make sure that we're nailing how they get to us. That's a really big part of it. I was told only a couple of days ago that people are now expecting your website to load within 3 seconds. So I thought it was about 7. So now we're down at 3 seconds. That's no time at all, is it? To even nail who you are for the person to look at your website. So the point of nailing it is how they find you. They feel confident in who you are when they find you. Now, you may not have a website yet. They might be part of where you're going and what you're doing. But, Google My Business gives you a free one, which will work for now. It's a start. It's saying, here I am. And Google's there kind of sticking up for you, going, oh, you really are verified. You really are a person. You can do these things with me and I'll share who you are until you've created that website. So, we need to nail the entrance in to see us. So, we do that in the academy. We do that as part of the groups, and my graduates will be doing that in their upcoming session with me at the weekend. Now, the next thing we do, nailing the actual consult. So I've got coming up on the 27th of March, it's Confident Consulting, okay? And it's a workshop, and we're going to workshop this because we're really going to talk about what we're saying to our clients. And something I'm sure you've heard me say before is when you see during the consult and you're talking to the client, you say things like, when I see you next. Because you don't have to do everything now. You don't have to do everything this minute. You don't have to do everything right, get it done in that consult. The point of seeing any form of therapist is that you develop a therapeutic long-term relationship. And in that therapeutic long-term relationship, we're actually expanding our client's universe, their understanding of health. So I admitted to a group of mentees the other day that when I was pregnant with my son, before I became a naturopath, I worked at the old, it's not there now, the old Royal Children's in Melbourne. And the only food, if you were on night shift, was a takeaway joint. So a really big one. So, you know, I was pregnant, I'd go downstairs and I'd be like, okay, I will have a burger. And now we know that's really bad for us, and we know better because of all our training as naturopaths, that is totally the wrong thing to do. I mean, like, you know, you're just really putting it out there to get gestational diabetes by eating burgers when you're pregnant. But people don't know that. That's not what the advertising they're seeing is. So we have to help them and support them to understand these things. One of my first clients in student clinic, so it's a very long time ago now, back on the burger thing. So I said to her, what does she eat for lunch? And I said, I must have used a different sentence, because she said, I have lettuce, tomato, pickle and some meat with my lunch. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Can you put apple cider vinegar with that? And she went, oh, I could try. I went, oh, that'd be great. You know, really helps your digestion, lowers the GI of food, you know, all the things. And then she came back for her follow-up appointment, and I said, oh, how did you go getting on with putting apple cider vinegar on your salad? And she said, well, it didn't really go in the burger. And so she was convinced that the burger she was having, that was enough salad. You know, and I hadn't, at the time, I was a student naturopath, and I didn't understand how questioning really works and how important questioning is. So now I've gone and I've done a coaching course. I did a year-long coaching course. But now I share all this information with my mentees about how we speak, because nailing it has a lot to do with our client coming back, our client being happy in the consult, and our client, you don't have to give people a supplement on the first appointment. Once you niche, then yeah, chances are you'll start giving supplements on the first appointment, because you know what they need and what they're deficient in, and so you'll just be like, yeah, you got to start with this. But when you have someone who's a bit, not they're different, but their problem is different to what you're used to covering, then it might just be that you can't, in that first appointment, give them something. You can't give them a herbal mix or a supplement or anything else. Maybe, like, you know, as they get more difficult because they've got more medications on board, I have a rule: you don't get anything on the first appointment if you're on 5 or more medications, except for homework, because I want to know where I can change things, and the other homework I give them is very minor dietary change from the 24-hour diet recall. So because if we're on lots of medications, we've got lots of contraindications, and 5 is like a time limit for me. And I will have open on a new client, if they've put in that they've got, especially men, if they've got a couple of medications, I will have open contraindication charts, maybe MIMS, so I can look up anything. Like a gentleman that I had in 2020. It was my, it was the first new client I'd had in 2020, because I closed my doors. Lots of my clients closed. Lots of people said no. They'd just come and see me when I was back up and running after the lockdown, because of course we didn't really know what was going on, did we? I didn't really know what I was doing. So he was my first one online, first new client online, I should say, back then. And I said, you know, what medications are you on? I went through and I said, is there anything else you need to tell me? And then he said, oh yeah, I take, and it was an epileptic medication. And now often with women, they forget they're on the oral contraceptive pill because they've been on it for so long. Oh, recent research, you shouldn't be on it for more than 10 years. Just put that one in there. Just slide that in under the zone. But he'd forgotten he was on anti-epileptic medication. And his anti-epileptic medication had lots of red flags for alcohol. And of course, he was drinking a lot of alcohol. So I said, you know, you do realise that your medication says no alcohol. And you're on a lot of alcohol, and now you're feeling really down and you're not doing anything. Do you think this is related? And he said, oh, I'll have to think about it. And so then he said, are you going to give me something? And I said, no, I don't know enough about this medication, and that's your number 5. So what I'd like to see is some diet and lifestyle change before I see you next, knowing in actual fact that he wasn't going to complete those things, and that he wasn't actually ready to see me or to do anything about how he was. He'd been booked in by his partner. I hadn't realised. That's one of my rules as well. If you want to see me, you have to book yourself in. But he'd been booked in by his partner. So he wasn't ready to make those changes. That wasn't where he was at in his life. It might have been where his partner was at in her life, that she was desperate for him to change, but he couldn't. He wasn't ready for it yet. He hadn't made that personal change. So I nailed that consult, and that I knew, number 1, that he wasn't going to come back. So I booked him in, but I was, I knew he would cancel. I was happy with that. So I booked him in on a lunchtime, so I knew that I could get a lunchtime. I knew that he wasn't ready for change, and this wasn't something that he was capable of completing at this time. So I nailed that. He was actually happy with seeing me. I know that he felt okay in the consult, but I knew also that he would feel a failure at the end of it because he hadn't done the simple things. So the simple things could be completed by his wife. So it was up to him whether he got somebody else to complete them. That is the cooking of the food, the going for walks with the dog in the evening with his wife, actually walking the dog. Apparently the dog wasn't going anywhere. The dog was at home tearing things up because it was so bored. So there were things that were normal things that he realistically should have, theoretically, all the things been able to change, but whether or not he was willing to, or whether he just passed them off to his wife, who knew. But he wasn't ready for it. But I was okay with that. Does that make sense? So I nailed that appointment because I knew I'd done everything right, that he was actually happy with the consult, but he knew that he wouldn't do what he was meant to do, just like I knew he wouldn't do what he was saying yes he would do. Directly after seeing him, I had another consult. I had a new consult with a lady that had to cancel prior. She was just busy, and so she'd moved her appointment, and she was happy to move it online. So she was a new client, but not like him. He was an officially new client. She was sort of an unofficially new client. That didn't make sense, but don't worry about it. So with her, nailing the appointment was giving her the lifestyle advice, giving her the diet change. Again, no supplements. Again, lots of homework whilst I researched her condition, even though she knew all about it. Most people know more about their weird conditions than I could ever know. But I had to find out about it. And so I needed time to do that once I'd spoken to her, once I'd gone through what she was taking, what she knew, and then fine, she turned up. So I knew I'd nailed that appointment, because I think with each and every appointment, we have to assess whether or not it worked, whether or not how we spoke to that person worked for you, how you spoke to the person worked for them, how, whether or not they're going to come back in your mind and their mind, and whether they do. There are many things about nailing the consult that is about rapport. And rapport is just as important as making sure that you've given your client the right supplement. Because often, especially with a herbal mix, we're doing it exactly for them, aren't we? And so they might come back next time and say, yeah, I've got a lot more energy, this, that, and the other thing. However, I'm not so good with blah, blah, or something else isn't as good as I would like it to be. So it's a really interesting, the word nailing it, I think we need to think to ourselves, what small part did I nail? What part of the whole did I nail? Because I might not have nailed the whole thing. It might be that you say to yourself, I nailed the 1 hour appointment. I nailed the 50-minute appointment. I nailed the 40-minute appointment. I nailed getting them to come back. I nailed the herbal mix that I created for that client, or the correct supplements for that client, or whatever it is, because I think we have to realize that nailing it can be small parts as well as large parts of the whole. So I'm going to leave you with that one. I'm going to leave you with the how am I nailing it today challenge. What can I do today that will nail my whatever it is? It might just be your to-do list. I'm not really that big on to-do lists. I will have a to-do list that has, like today, podcasting. It's just got one word on my list because this takes time. It takes effort. It takes thought. It takes conversation. It takes a good throat. It takes, I have to feel chipper and up so that you at the end of it feel chipper and up. So there can't be lots of other things on my to-do list as well as podcast. And also there's a lot of setup involved. So, when we think of that, it might be that you look at your to-do list and it's got 100,000 things on it and you just circle one of those things and you nail it today. So I'm going to leave you with the nail it concept, and I'll probably come back to this again and again. I actually really love the way she said, I just want to be able to nail it, Geraldine, because there's so many things that we can think about nailing, reduce down and do in smaller amounts rather than the big one. So if you've enjoyed today, don't forget to please share this with your friends and colleagues. Put it in Facebook groups and things so that people know it's out there, because if it's helped you, hopefully it will help somebody else as well. So it's been absolutely brilliant chatting, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Bite Size podcast.